explore with you the intersection between data journalism and data science. I'm a data strategist at IBM, and what data strategist means is that I define and design AI business solutions for IBM clients by uncovering and revealing the overlooked insights hidden in companies' data. And I do that by applying an editorial approach to AI and data science practices. And this involves running design thinking workshops specifically tailored to a data-centric approach and methodology that I developed in IBM. And then, of course, the big topic for today's conversation, data narrative building and crafting data narratives that translate the algorithms into actionable knowledge and concrete business results. And for this reason, for this particular reason, I find myself at the intersection of the technical and the business realm. And I act kind of a translator who bridges these two very different worlds through data stories. But let me start by telling you why, from a background in data journalism, I ended up in a team of data scientists. So I'll do that by sharing my personal story with you, the story of my journey in IBM. So when I got the job at IBM, I was hired as the data journalist for a team named Data Science and AI Elite Team, a client-facing team that develops AI solutions for helping companies to leverage AI. And so I was really excited about the role because I knew I wanted to be where innovation is happening and where AI is really shaking things up. But I didn't have any clue why a data science team was looking for a data journalist. So it sounds very particular to me. And in fact, when I joined the EMEA division of this team, I got in touch with my new colleagues who were coming from multiple different backgrounds. And so some of them are machine learning engineers, others are data engineers, some of them are decision optimization experts, other proper data scientists, and then we have people who are devoted to the growth of the business of the team. And then there was me, the only data journalist in this team, and I was doubting about what my role would be, how I would help my new colleagues to achieve their objectives with my skills, because overall I was really coming from a totally different environment, and I had a specific view of what a story means. And the fact was that especially my colleagues didn't know what a data journalist was about and what my role was. And for this reason, it happens that as soon as I joined the team, they started immediately asking me about creating data visualization with D3.js, and then asking me to build the dashboards and the UI and help them with Matplotlib or Shiny. So they were interested, and yes, that was my face at the time, they were interested in every kind of chart, graphic, because they thought that data visualization was the secret sauce for them to show their models results to the client and make them understand what they were doing. And so they had this misconception that data visualization is equal to data stories, which is not. It's completely different. And so I really wanted to start conveying the message that actually data visualization is never the point. Data visualization is only a mean that we use to display data, visualize insights, but to communicate those insights, we really have to use stories. If we don't use stories, we will always fail to communicate data and AI insights. And so it was from starting from this concept that I really wanted my colleagues to start seeing the data as a raw material that we can shape as a tangle of intricate patterns and connections. And it's by applying research and a deep understanding to find these patterns and connections that we can really put data in context and build a story that returns visually the data's inner structure and complexity. And so it was very clear that they were missing a process, the process of how from insights to build stories passing through context. And so it was very clear to me that step that in the process, but the problem was how to communicate that message to my new colleagues. And so this brings me to the first part of my story, how I applied data storytelling with clients and how data storytelling became crucial for a client engagement. The first the opportunity to really show data scientists what I was doing came with this particular client named James Fisher and Son, which is a leader provider in oil, gas, and marine services. And so James Fisher approached IBM because their most urgent need was to develop a predictive maintenance system. And so to use AI to identify and locate the failures occurring along the high voltage cables of their wind farm assets. And so basically the cables which bring the current load from the ocean to the mainland. And as soon as we started the engagement, the data scientists jumped into the data. They started making their exploration, developing the models, the machine learning models to give the client predictions. And the first presentation that they compiled and presented to the client looked something like an hodgepodge of screenshots taken from their Jupyter notebooks. And that wasn't really a story. It wasn't a story because everything was a kind of a mix of separate insights. There was no context whatsoever to link and explain relationships between the data presented to the client. The presentation was a lot, full of jargon and technical details, too technical for the people that were attending the presentation and who didn't share the same background of knowledge of the data scientists. It was like having a not articulate speech. And so the people in the room, James Fisher, couldn't consume the story, if we want to call it story, as it was being told, because they got the general sense of what was happening and how the data scientists were using their data, but it was not enough to get that knowledge and do something with it. It wasn't enough to take action based on the AI results, the AI outcomes that were being presented. What if I tell you that from here now, I'm gonna tell you this story and give you this talk in Egyptian hieroglyphics? How would you feel about that? I believe it would be pretty confusing, right? You see that it's writing, you know that means something, but you can't really detect and take the message out of that, right? And so this was the feeling of James Fisher. What we really need to do was to bridge the gap between the algorithms and the way they were presented to the clients and the human understanding. Because we had in the room different levels of people with different backgrounds of knowledge and expertise. And we couldn't assume that they knew very well data science and what we were doing as we did. And so I believe that it was that crack in the process that allowed me to start applying an editorial approach to this particular AI use case. And so I started from scratch by running a design thinking workshop to conceptually understand the information that the client wish they had access to. And then from here, I interviewed the stakeholders. I skim through the interviews the same way I would do in journalism to frame the story and select the key information that need to be part of that story. And then I highlight and define my storyline. I started my sketches around how the data narrative could look like. And eventually, as last step, I implemented the interactive data narrative. And so it was really by starting from this smaller story and applying a new approach around it that eventually I ended up discovering a much larger story. So James Fisher were keeping asking for a maintenance system, but what they really needed was a much bigger solution. And it wasn't until they saw their data coming to life in a cohesive visual narrative that they understood that the real problem was to bridge the technical aspect of the maintenance of their business to the business operation aspect of the company. And so by showing them how the results generated by the machine learning models can impact their business and can be used to optimize and make the asset more efficient, they were able to understand how AI could help them really beyond what they were expecting, beyond the limited use case that they went to IBM, asking about at IBM in the first place. And so it was really by showing them how to combine a predictive model related to the technical aspect of the wind farm to a prescriptive model connected to the business sides of their company, that they understood and they were able to see the translation of their data into concrete business result. And they understood that this story could act as an AI strategy for them because this model could be applied to other James Fisher's subsidiaries and not just wind farms. And so for these reasons, through this process, we were able to create a new language that translated the knowledge locked in the data scientist Jupyter notebook into something live, into a compelling visual story that translates algorithm results into actionable knowledge. And so at this point, the data scientists understood very well that even in data science and not just in journalism, you need a proper story, a story built on a particular story arch. A story arch that begins with what? What do we need to do? What needs to get done? What defines the scope of the project and, of course, of the story? And then we are all obsessed with how we're going to do that, how we're going to implement this solution, how help to identify the process that we are going to follow. But what if I tell you that there are two more things, two even more important things than what and how? First, context, because it's not just what the data says by itself, but it's how data relates to the events and the facts that surround it, and how we can discover the relationship that connect the data to the context around it. And then the most important component in a story arch is why. Why is the most important reason, and it's the most important question that we can ask ourselves. And oftentimes, because we are so skillful, so smart, so knowledgeable, we skip through this word that means everything. And so these three letters are the reason why the story gets written. And so it's by applying a story arch like this that we were able to really communicate with people who weren't share our same background of knowledge. And also another component of the James Fisher example was really important, the format of the data, because we know that, and there are a lot of cognitive studies around that, aesthetics helps in triggering curiosity. It brings people to be willing to explore the data and approach the data from a more human perspective. And especially today, I believe, where trust in AI is kept being eroded, the format, how we present the data, how we communicate the data is even more important. And so it was through this that the data scientist got that it was really, really important to connect AI to a human conversation if we really want to unleash the AI potential. And I believe also to accelerate the AI adoption. Because eventually what we want to do is really communicate what AI can do to humans. And so for this reason, we have to engage with people through emotions. And in fact, we as humans, we are emotional decision makers. And what we have to do with data storytelling, it's really stimulating our emotional intelligence and connecting it to our analytical intelligence, which drives the decisions. And for that, Gartner, in one of its latest reports, says that by 2025, data stories will be the most widespread way of consuming analytics. And it's true. And it's true because this reason, because we have to communicate in the most human, approachable way, the data and AI. And this brings me to the second chapter of my story. I showed you how I used data storytelling with clients. Now I'm going to show you how I'm using data storytelling internally in IBM. So in June, I had the pleasure to join a new team, the Chief Data Office team of the Cloud and Cognitive Software organization inside IBM, which is the organization where I belong to. And so as in every organization, the chief data officer leads the digital transformation of a company by ensuring that to generate value out of enterprise data assets, by defining the AI strategy that the company should pursue, and ensuring that the AI projects needed are strictly connected to that strategy. And of course, all these responsibilities are connected to a specific goal. So generating business value for the organization through AI. But beyond these very technical and business-oriented responsibility, to achieve these goals, the chief data officer has to support the change needed to lead the organization toward the transformation. And that involves, of course, increasing the data literacy inside the organization to really build a new culture of innovation that can be communicated through a specific vision. And so all these elements are strictly connected together and, as you can imagine, supported by data storytelling, because oftentimes the chief data officer has to communicate, innovate, and complex analytics ideas to key internal stakeholders. And so it's here that, again, data storytelling can really be super helpful and crucial. And so for that reason, I want to talk to you about another project that have been done in this new team, which is a storytelling project around a newsletter focused on the journey of IBM toward digital transformation. And so every 2 weeks, I publish stories regarding the people, the tools, and the techniques that we use to really make the leap toward the transformation of the company. And while I was designing and structuring this newsletter, I was keeping wondering how to include a data narrative in the traditional format of this newsletter. And so the answer to my questions came with I saw one of the first story that I published. And so I was interested in giving people access to the information that they couldn't read between the lines of the text of my story. And I really wanted them to see through the text, through the words, and get a second layer of the information available. And it's for this reason that I use data to create a very unconventional and I would say unusual data narrative that comes from an NLP algorithm that I developed to parse every story that I publish and to collect the data generated by this algorithm. And then I visualize those data to really create as I said, a second layer of information that people could read in a new way by really getting the sense of all the words, the meanings, and the sentiments used in every story that I published. And so I attached to this project a legend to really go through the data and explore it, understanding the meaning of the word, the keywords, the attributes around the keywords, the sentiment of the sentence, and how much meaningful are the words used. And I kept going with this project that I named Interviews Visualized, to really for a specific goal, which was to show people in the organization a new way through which we can make AI and machine learning more accessible to a broader audience of non-experts. And that was key. The visualization was really unusual, as you see, and the story that I built out of the machine learning result was even more unconventional. But it was really a way to start spurring new ideas in the people's mindset. And I wanted them to start really envisioning new ways through which we can exploit AI and communicate its results. And it's for this reason that now I'm going to bring you into my personal workspace, my workshop, if you like. And I'm gonna talk to you about this last project, a personal project that I started with the intent to kept going and exploring new ways to communicate AI. And so at the beginning of the pandemic, of the COVID pandemic, I was reading and seeing a lot of data stories published by many media outlets, but very few of them, even known, I would say, were using AI to make that stories. And so the majority of them were based on statistical analysis, mainstream analysis. And so since my colleagues, I mean, some of them were really experimenting with the COVID data to come up with new predictions, so for example, around the number of infected cases, I thought that that was the right moment to start to prototyping a new platform where to share stories built upon AI technologies, to really help everyone to put fact in context and understand how to use the AI outcomes when it comes to our personal life, like in the case of the pandemic. And so I wanted to help people to understand how to use the predictions of machine learning models, and especially how to cope with the uncertainty that is included in every algorithm, especially in a case like the pandemic. And so with a few friends of mine, I designed and then implemented this prototype where we were sharing visual stories with, as you can see, a very bold and fresh style, because the intent here was really to facilitate the understanding of AI through formats that can be compelling, that engage people emotionally, and that are really easy to consume and use and understand. And it's because of these reasons that I started this experimental project to really spread inside the organization a new conception regarding data storytelling and the communication around AI. Because stories, data stories, help us to explain complex concepts and ideas. Stories can be shared, stories can be told. Stories overcome barriers, in my opinion, by spurring new conversations, opening up new dialogues between experts, and raising more questions around AI. And so it's by doing that that stories actually build bridges between domains and experts which otherwise wouldn't be connected. And I believe that is because these particular reasons that at some point in my journey, I stopped feeling the only data journalist isolated by my team, and I became aware of my role in that team. I realized with time that I had a specific mission that I could serve with my particular skills in the context of AI and data science. And that mission is really to make AI more understandable for everyone. And it's with this idea that I would like to leave you today, with the idea to make AI more popular. And what I mean with pop AI is really to find a way to make AI explainable. Because if we want to spread the use of a fair AI, we have to put, every time we use AI, the genuine effort to communicate what AI is and how it works, and especially what the AI outcomes mean to people and to people's life. And it's by connecting people not to where we are, but to where they are, that we can really improving the human comprehensions of AI. And so by making AI more explainable, hopefully we will increase trust in AI, and especially fairness, which today is the most urgent need that we have. Thank you.